If you've been playing the guitar for years but still feel lost every time that you go to move around your guitar neck, then this is the video that's going to fix it. We're going to talk about 5 key areas that you need to get down in order to be able to understand your fretboard completely. When you understand your fretboard, you will be able to transfer the sounds in your head directly to the fretboard so that you can make the music that you want to make. So let's get into it. So in my experience as a guitar teacher, the first huge miss that most players have is that they haven't learned the notes on the fretboard. Now, it's absolutely a fair point that when people pick up the guitar to learn it in the first place, generally they just want to learn songs and they want to have fun and they just want to get playing. That's fine, but could you imagine a violin player, a piano player, a saxophone player, or almost any other instrument that is pitched where the player doesn't know the notes on their actual instrument? Almost ridiculous to think that people wouldn't know that, but guitar players generally all learn from tabs, especially if they're self-taught. They just don't know this information and it's holding them back massively. So if you're the kind of guitar player that wants to stick on some backing tracks at home and just jam along, you're interested in improvising, or even if you just want to learn other people's solos, having signposts along the neck that absolutely help you to see where things are going, get into the mindset of other guitar players if you're learning their material, or just being able to improvise. You want to be able to hang on to all the chord tones and all of the scales go along with the music that you're trying to make. It's a fair point in that you need to be very, very careful of people that are out there telling you that you don't need to learn scales and things like that in order to be able to play most things. The kind of people that want to take a lesson from me, they're going to be interested in people like Joe Satriani or Steve Vai or those kind of guitar players. And to be absolutely frank, there's no way that you're going to be able to play any of that kind of music and improvise and all the rest of it without knowing scales. That doesn't mean just mindlessly running up and down shapes and all of that stuff, but you are going to need to learn scales and you're going to need to learn how to control them, and it all starts with knowing the notes on your fretboard. So in any one octave of the guitar, I would suggest that you want to be able to find all of the locations of one particular note. So as an E is our lowest note on the guitar, let's start with that. So what I would suggest that you want to do is go from this E to the next E that you can play on your guitar. Now the next one that you can play on that 6th string is the 12th fret. Then if you move directly to your next string, the next E is at the 7th fret on the A string. Then you've got one at the 2nd fret on your D string. You've then got one at the 9th fret on your G. You've got one at the 5th fret on your B. You've got the open E string. And then you've also got the 12th fret on the high E string. Once you've done that, you've played through all of the E's in that first octave of the guitar. I'd suggest that you want to be able to find and locate every single note in that first octave of the guitar as easily as that. You want a full course that will take you through how to learn that, and you can play along with me and all of the rest of it so that it makes it easy to do. In the links in the description, you'll find a link to all of that sort of thing. Okay, next up I want to talk about the caged system. So when you know the notes on the guitar neck, there are a bunch of different systems that are really good for learning the guitar inside and out. The cage system is just one of them, but what I want to do here is dispel some of the myths about the cage system, because there's a lot of people that are approaching this wrong. So what you can see on the fretboard diagram right now is a C major chord in the open position. What people tend to learn with the cage system is that you can play that C major chord in 5 different shapes, which you'll see scrolling by on the fretboard diagrams right now, okay? But the thing is, that's leading to a lot of confusion. So what you see in the next shape here is this is a C major chord being played as a bar chord like this, okay? What a lot of people refer to that as a C chord in its A shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, like this. If I take this shape back down to the open position, what happens with that is this shape looks like an open A chord. So people are referring to this as a C chord in its A shape. Now the next one along in the cage system, you'll have this, which is a C chord in its G shape. Have a C chord in its E shape. Finally, a C chord in its D shape. Personally, I find that terminology is what's confusing people around the caged system. So what I teach my students is how to look at this in a numbered system. So let's have a look at that. So what we're going to talk about here is something called the EDCAG system. Now, nobody was ever going to remember the word EDCAG. It's not an actual word in the English language. So caged gives us a catchy way of remembering the name of the system because it is a word that lives in the English language. But EDCAG is the actual order that the numerical shapes play out. So let's have a look at what that means. So what you can see on the fretboard diagram right now is an E major chord in its open position. But how we're going to refer to this is an E chord in shape 1. Okay? So if I now move along to the next chord form for E, okay, what's being played here is an E major chord in position 2 or shape 2 or zone 2 of the cage system, however you would like to refer to this. How I'm not referring to this is that this is an E chord in its D shape to remove the confusion. The next chord that I'm playing here, this is an E major chord in shape 3. In the old way of thinking, this would have been seen as an E chord in C shape, because if I take it down here, this is what a C chord looks like in its open position. Or if you imagine your first finger as a capo, your first finger, like if you put a capo at the 4th fret and then played a C chord shape next to it, you'd actually be getting an E major chord, harmonically speaking, because the notes we have are E, G sharp and B, which is E major, okay? So this is an E chord in shape 3. Then have an E chord in shape 4. Finally, an E chord in shape 5. So this spells out the word EDCAG, but what we want to be, in terms of those shapes, but how we want to look at this, an E chord in shape 1, an E chord in shape 2, an E chord in shape 3, an E chord in shape 4, an E chord in shape 5. Now that is a transferable chord system so that we can now play any chord type in 5 positions. So for example, if I wanted to play a G major chord, this would be a G major chord in shape 1. Yes, it looks like an open E position, and you could think of this as the E shape for G major, but I encourage you not to. I encourage you to think of this as a G shape 1 chord. So therefore this would be G in shape 2, this would be G in shape 3, this would be G in shape 4, and then lastly G in shape 5. If we just change the key again quickly, I'm going to look at an A major chord in position 1, okay? And this is what we would refer to in the old world as an E shape. Okay, but what I'm going to do in this time is I'm going to outline where the root notes are. So this is another thing about going back a step to when we were talking about learning the notes on the fretboard. It's really, really important when you're outlining caged chord forms to be able to see where the root notes are inside it. So what you can see where I've put this circle around the particular notes. I've got the circle around this, this and this. These are the A root notes that live within that A chord form, okay? That's very, very important for when you want to add scales and arpeggios and all of these other things when you're learning this, is that you can see that this is where your root notes are. So if we have a look at position 2, this is an A major chord in shape 2, and the root notes are here and here. A major chord in shape 3, root notes here and here. A major chord in shape 4, with your root notes here and here. And your A major chord in shape 5, with your root notes here, here and here. If you really want to have a quality command of your fretboard, being able to see the root notes in the different caged positions is absolutely vital, because once you've built that basic scaffold of being able to see those major chords and the root notes, you can start populating caged with the various information that you need, which will be things like arpeggios and scales and etc, etc. There is also a minor caged chord form system which looks like this. So what you can see on the screen in front of you right now is the A minor chord in position 1. The root notes aren't going to change because they obviously can't change. It's impossible for them to change location. So an A always just lives here, here and here. Shape 2 chord form looks like this. So what you'll notice is that we had a root, 5th, root, major 3rd for our major chord, and that note has been flattened to a minor 3rd. And your root notes are here and here. 3 is a horrible chord to hold. And many of you may be looking at this going, why on earth do I even need these chords? As a rhythm guitar player, I'm not going to use them. You probably won't, that's true, but it's from a fretboard visualization perspective that you want to be able to see this. So it's very important as a soloist that you can see, here is the chord, and then later on you're going to see how we will turn that into single note entities like the actual triad. You maybe want to play the 7th arpeggio or the pentatonic scale around it, etc. And it's being able to see this basic chordal template that allows us to build all of these other materials over it. Here's our A minor chord in shape 4, again with your root notes here and here. And lastly, your A minor chord in shape 5. Now, I can't stress enough how important it is that you get that basic major and minor chordal scaffold of your cage system down so that you can build all of your other harmonic devices on top of it. So if you're looking for more help in how to do that, if you want to follow a course or take actual live lessons with me, all of the links for all of that stuff are in the description. And the next thing I want to talk to you about in this video that's really important is getting 7th chords and arpeggios under your fingers, okay? So in the following diagrams, I'm going to break down what major 7 chords and the relevant arpeggios look like in the 5-position caged zonal system. So we're now swapping back to the key of G. We talked about the key of G earlier, and we're now looking at a G major 7 chord and arpeggio in the shape 1 area. So earlier on we talked about using this major chord type. And what we want to do here is look at this as a major 7, which is a slightly more expensive, jazzier version of a straight major chord, okay? So what you can see, where I'm playing the chord, which is on the left-hand side of your screen right now, the chord is using a voicing of root, major 7, major 3rd, perfect 5th, and that's what I've put into the diagram. Now, being able to play the chord is very, very useful, obviously, from a rhythm guitar perspective, but what you also want to be able to do is articulate that chord as a soloist, playing the chord tones. Many of you have probably heard about using chord tones as a soloist, and how you will do that is be able to play the notes of that chord as single note soloing entities, otherwise known as an arpeggio, which looks like this. Now, if you talk to somebody like Frank Gambale will say that this shape is not very efficient from a sweep picking perspective, and he would look at playing it a different way. And that's absolutely fine, and I'm all on board with playing things with lots of different techniques and looking to expand your fretboard as much as you can to allow you to play the music that you want to make. But what's really, really good about the cage system as a soloist is that you'll be visualizing that chord. So if you want to be able to play over changes or articulate the chords that are in a backing track or in the whatever your band is playing, whatever it is that you want to do, when a chord comes by, assuming that you know the chord progression or you're reading a chart, when you see that chord symbol for G major 7 and you know your rhythm guitar player is playing this, you're visualizing this, and then you are able to outline that chord by playing all of the notes that are in that position. You're not being taken away from the chord by playing something like this. So that's that same G major 7 arpeggio, but being played over 3 octaves. Now, when you're playing that, you're not keeping close to the chord that you're trying to envisage in your head, which can make it sometimes difficult or confusing to phrase. But also as well, as we go through the various shapes of this, you'll see we have a G major 7 shape 2 chord. So this will be based around the position that we had for our G major shape 2 major chord. We've got a major 7 version, and then starting on that major 3rd, we have the 5th. So we're going to go major 3rd, 5th, major 7 root, 3rd, 5th, 7 root, major 3rd. So this version or voicing or shape for that major 7 arpeggio is being based around this shape. So again, if I was to invert that, so I put the major 3rd that we've got on our top string onto the bottom string, we've got a sort of a different sounding, a bit of a deeper voicing, because I've got that 3rd in the bass. So if your rhythm guitar player is playing this and you articulate it with this, Again, you are completely aligned to where the chord voicing is being played. Now, as you can imagine, for each of the caged positions there is a caged chord form. Like right now, this is a G major 7 in shape 3, and there is an arpeggio form. So here's the next one in shape 4. Lastly, in shape 5. In Western music, there are 5 main chord types that you would be soloing over. So you've got major 7, minor 7, dominant 7, minor 7 flat 5, and altered dominant 7. Now, if we just take away the altered dominant 7 for one moment, that leaves us with 4 main chord types: major 7, minor 7, dominant 7, and minor 7 flat 5. They are the 4 main chord types that live within a harmonized major scale. Now, something that I highly recommend that anyone watching this video does is learn the 5 key chord shapes from the cage system for those 4 chord types, and then looks at being able to align with each one the arpeggios that go along with it. Then for playing over the 5th chord type, the altered dominant chord type, you can basically take your dominant 7th chords that you will have learned and then literally alter them by having flat 5s or sharp 5s, or adding a sharp 9 or a flat 9, and then altering your arpeggio types to suit to be able to play over them. Now, there may be some people watching this video that will say there's way more chords than those 5 chord types. That's absolutely true, there are. But if you are soloing over most backing tracks that you'll find on YouTube, those chord types make up about 80% of all modern music. So if you get those down, you'll be able to basically improvise and jam and handle anything. Okay, the next key area that I want to talk to you guys about here is then aligning probably the most important scale you'll ever learn on the guitar with those caged positions. So let's say, for example, you've got a minor 7 chord in shape 1 that would look like this. There are, of course, 5 shapes of that chord, and around every single one of those chord shapes, I would want to be able to play a minor pentatonic scale. Now, why that's so good from a fretboard visualization perspective is because it means that any chord that's being played in your rhythm guitar, you'll be able to see that chord instantly in 5 different positions, which means you'll be able to see it basically over the whole guitar neck, and then instantly you'll have access to a minor pentatonic scale, which is every guitar player's favourite soloing tool. Of course, there are way more pentatonic scales than just the standard minor pentatonic scale, and there are some very specific applicable ones to those 5 chord types that I talked to you about earlier. So if you want to get the lowdown on how all of that stuff works, do check out the links in the description below. The key takeaway here though is that any caged form that you have for a minor 7 or a minor chord, you want to be able to align with that chord shape a pentatonic scale. The next area that we want to talk about is being able to align the modes of the major scale with those chord types. Again, we'll stick with our minor 7 chord. So imagine that we're playing our A minor 7 in shape 1, but we don't want to use just a pentatonic scale. We want to bring in a couple of color tones that will bring in something that just has a bit more flavor. Now, something that's going to be a great mode to use over a minor 7 chord will be something like you see on the fretboard diagram on the screen, which is called the Dorian mode. And why that sounds so good is because it's basically like a minor pentatonic scale where we're going to add a 9th and a major 6. So the whole scale sounds like this. Now what that brings in is a bit of colour tones in terms of like that 9th is a very pretty sound, the major 6 is a cool sound. What you can do with this, of course, you could play any minor mode that you like, of which there is Aeolian or there is Phrygian. There's lots and lots of different minor scales that you could use, but Dorian's just one particularly good one. Now what you can see on the fretboard diagram here is the A Dorian mode being played in position 1. So again, to have true mastery of your fretboard, what I would suggest that you do is you go through the 5 shapes of the chord and be able to play the 5 modal shapes of that Dorian mode to align with it. Going back to our 5 main chord types, if you've got major 7, there are some modal scales that would be applicable to that one. With minor 7, modal scales that are applicable to that one. Dominant 7 and minor 7 flat 5, there are all modal scales from the major scale that are applicable to those chords. Now, something that's really handy about the guitar is the 5 shapes of the major scale that you would learn aligned with the cage system would be also the same 5 shapes of all of the modes. Okay, so you don't have to keep learning new shapes all of the time. What you do need to learn is the order of the shapes that's applicable for each mode. There's a lot of homework to go through on something like a YouTube video here, so if you want to get the lowdown on how all of that stuff works, do check out the links in the description below. Now, if you're the kind of guitar player that's more interested in technical styles of music, you may have heard of something that's called 3 notes per string, and that's what's up on the fretboard diagram in front of us now. So, something that's very important when you're looking at 3 notes per string, this is just a different way of laying out your scales. So, I have A Dorian in position 1 as a 3 notes per string scale, okay? Now what that means is I'm still playing the same notes that I would have had in my caged position like this. But what I'm doing is I'm laying it out so that there are 3 notes on every string. So we play 3 on E, then we're going to play 3 on the A string, 3 on the D, 3 on the G, etc, etc. So we're playing exactly the same scale, exactly the same notes, but 3 notes per string. Okay, now the benefits of this system is that it does allow you to play very, very fast. It works really, really nice for legato ideas, so when you're using hammer-ons and pull-offs. And also as well for alternate picking. The problem with this though, as a system in terms of visualization, is that as I've moved up that shape, it's taken me away from the actual chord. So my last note is over here, but the chord that I'm visualizing this around is over here. So for a lot of guitar players, it causes problems in terms of their phrasing because they get lost in playing shapes and not thinking about the intervals. Now, if I just go back a step to my caged shape, something that's very important with this is that you'll see, as I've made the fretboard diagram, I have put the voicing of the scale into the diagram. So you can see where there is a root note, a major second, a minor third, 4th, 5th, 6th, flat 7, etc. Now, when you're learning your scales in all of these different positions, it's very, very important that you learn the voicing so that you will have command of the interval that you are playing when you are improvising. Now, if that sounds like it's a lot of work, to a point it is, but something you need to be very careful of is people out there on the internet that are encouraging you to take shortcuts. If you're being encouraged to take shortcuts, you will not have control and command of these harmonic devices, so you'll never be able to shoot for something like a major 6 or a major 9 because you won't know where they live. So you'll be hanging on for dear life, hoping that you hit the right notes. Now, there are some people that will be watching this going, yeah, but what if I've got a great ear? Well, if you've got a great ear and you can just hear where you need to go, you're very lucky. For most of us that don't have this, we need our ears to be informed by the things that we've been able to see on the fretboard. So if you train your ears by going, I know that this is a major second over this chord, you will then be able to decide for yourself if you like the sound of that interval against the chord, and then you'll be able to play it and call upon it. Something that I highly recommend that you get to once you've learnt your fretboard in this kind of way is that in all of the different positions you start developing vocabulary, and you want to have vocabulary that moves across the neck in different positions. You want to have vocabulary that combines areas of the neck over 1, 2, 3, 4 strings, etc. And then at long last, what you want to be able to do is meander in and out of the scale so that you can solo wherever you want. What effectively means is that when you see a chord form or a chord chart or a backing track that says you need to be able to play over this chord, A-7, and the Dorian mode is the applicable mode, what you will be able to see in your mind's eye and see on your fretboard is what's on the diagram underneath my guitar right now. So when you can see it like that, you can play along the length of strings, you can play vertically through positions, or you can combine areas to move within licks, lines, runs, or whatever it is that you want to play. This becomes particularly difficult is when you're playing over harmony that has moving terrain. So if you're playing over chord changes, what needs to happen is your visualization of the fretboard would need to change so that you can see where your licks and lines and runs are for that different chord. For example, you could be going from an A minor 7 to something like a C minor 7. So the chord quality hasn't changed, so you could still think Dorian, but you'd need to think C Dorian, so you've changed key. Another thing that's common that could quite happen, you could have A minor 7, which is then going to a D7 sharp 9, flat 9, and then into a G major 7. A very common chord progression called a 2-5-1. So when you're playing over that D altered chord, not only have you changed key, but you've changed chord quality, so you need to be able to see all of your D altered materials on the neck so that you can start phrasing, developing your vocabulary, playing your ideas, etc, etc. Now at this point, I don't want you to be scared thinking that there is a mountain to climb, because the point is all of this stuff has actually been worked out for you. What you just need to follow is a structured path that will get you to a point where you can learn it all and then use it. If you're very interested in either following a course or taking lessons with me so I can show you how to do all of that, check out the links in the description box below. If you're keen to continue your learning here on YouTube, YouTube is a pretty smart tool and it knows what you're probably going to be interested in looking at next, which has just popped up somewhere on your screen right now. So click that video and I'll see you in the next lesson.